They say trust is like glass. Once it shatters, you can never put the pieces back together the same way. But that Tuesday morning in March, as I lay on the gurney watching the fluorescent lights blur past above me, I still believed in forever. I still believed that when you promise to love someone in sickness and in health, you actually mean it. I still believed that home was more than just four walls and a mortgage. The anesthesia mask covered my face, and the last thing I saw was Michael squeezing my hand, whispering, "I'll be right here when you wake up, baby. Everything's going to be okay." That was the last lie he ever told me to my face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pain started on a Sunday night while we were watching a movie on our couch in our little ranch house on Maple Street. It felt like someone was twisting a knife just below my ribs, sharp and relentless. Michael paused the remote and looked at me with concern as I doubled over, clutching my side. "Maybe it's something you ate," he suggested, rubbing my back gently. By Monday morning, I couldn't stand up straight. By Monday evening, I was vomiting everything I tried to keep down. Michael drove me to Riverside Community Medical Center with his jaw tight and his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Just hold on, Sarah," he kept saying. "We're almost there." The emergency room doctor took one look at my bloodwork and called for immediate surgery. "Your gallbladder is severely infected," Dr. Peterson explained to both of us in that sterile little consultation room. "If we don't operate tonight, it could rupture. This is serious." I remember Michael going pale, his hand finding mine automatically. We'd been married 8 years, and I'd never seen him look so scared. "How long will the surgery take?" he asked. "How long will she need to recover?" The doctor explained it could be anywhere from 2 to 4 hours for the operation, depending on complications, and I'd likely need to stay in the hospital for at least a week, possibly longer if there were any issues with healing. That night, as they wheeled me toward the operating room, Michael walked alongside my gurney. He was wearing his favorite blue button-down shirt, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary 2 years ago. His dark hair was messy from running his hands through it all day, and his brown eyes looked tired but determined. "I love you so much, Sarah," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "I'm going to take care of everything while you're recovering, okay? Don't worry about anything except getting better." I squeezed his hand as hard as I could manage. "I love you too. Thank you for being here." The anesthesiologist adjusted something on my IV, and the world started to fade around the edges. The last coherent thought I had was how lucky I was to have someone who loved me enough to handle everything while I was helpless. The surgery took 5 hours. When I finally came to in the recovery room, everything felt distant and fuzzy, like I was looking at the world through thick glass. A nurse named Jennifer was checking my vitals, her movements efficient and gentle. "How are you feeling, honey?" she asked softly. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my abdomen throbbed with every breath. "Where's Michael?" I managed to whisper. She glanced at the clock on the wall. "Visiting hours ended about an hour ago, but he stayed as long as they'd let him. He'll be back first thing in the morning." I nodded and drifted back to sleep, feeling safe knowing he'd been there waiting for me. But when morning came, Michael didn't show up. The nurses kept asking if they wanted them to call anyone, and I kept telling them to try his cell phone. Maybe he's stuck in traffic, I reasoned, though it didn't make sense. His office was only 15 minutes from the hospital, and he'd never been late for anything important in all the years I'd known him. By noon, I was starting to worry. By evening, I was starting to panic. Emma Rodriguez, my best friend and a nurse at the hospital, stopped by after her shift ended. "Still no word from Michael?" she asked, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair beside my bed. I shook my head, trying not to cry. "This isn't like him, Emma. Something must be wrong. What if he was in an accident? What if something happened and no one knows to call me?" Emma pulled out her phone. "Let me try calling him." She dialed his number and waited, then shook her head. Straight to voicemail. She tried his office next. "Hi, this is Emma Rodriguez calling about Michael Chen. Is he available?" There was a pause, then her expression changed. "Oh, okay. Thank you." She hung up and looked at me carefully. "Sarah, his office said he took a leave of absence. They said it was for a family emergency." "A family emergency? I was the family emergency, and I was right here in this hospital bed.
Where was he? Emma stayed with me until visiting hours ended, making phone calls and trying to reach anyone who might know where Michael was. She called his brother Ryan, his mother Patricia, even some of his coworkers. No one had heard from him since Monday night. Maybe he just needed some space to process everything, Emma said gently. Some people don't handle hospitals well. I see it all the time. But I knew Michael. He had been with me through my appendectomy 3 years ago, holding my hand through every step of the recovery. This wasn't about him being uncomfortable with hospitals. Dr. Peterson stopped by Wednesday morning to check my incision and discuss my recovery timeline. The surgery went very well, he said, making notes on my chart. But you're going to need to take it easy for at least 6 to 8 weeks. No heavy lifting, no strenuous activity. You'll need someone to help you with basic tasks for the first few weeks especially. I nodded, assuming Michael would be there to help me through everything. When can I go home? I asked. Dr. Peterson glanced at my chart. If your healing continues progressing this well, probably by the weekend. Do you have someone who can stay with you and help with recovery? My husband, I said automatically. Dr. Peterson smiled. Good. Having strong support at home makes all the difference in recovery. But Thursday came and went with no sign of Michael. Emma had been calling in favors with other nurses to check on me during their breaks, bringing me updates from her attempts to track him down. I drove by your house, she told me Thursday evening. His car wasn't there, but the lights were on. Maybe he's just been staying somewhere else because he's too worried to sleep properly. It sounded reasonable, but something in my chest felt heavy and wrong. Friday morning, Dr. Peterson cleared me for discharge. You're healing beautifully, he said. Just make sure to take it slow and follow up with your regular doctor next week. Emma had volunteered to drive me home and stay with me for the first few days until Michael surfaced. He's probably just overwhelmed, she kept saying, as we gathered our things. Men sometimes handle crisis situations by shutting down. I bet he'll be there when we get to the house, probably with flowers and apologies. But
preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Emma pulled into the driveway of 1247 Maple Street. Something was immediately wrong. There was a bright yellow sign staked into the front lawn that made my blood run cold. Sold. In bold red letters across a real estate sign I'd never seen before. Emma saw it at the same time I did. "What the hell?" she whispered, parking the car and staring at the sign. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there staring at the house I'd lived in for 6 years. The house where Michael and I had painted the kitchen sunshine yellow because it made me happy. Where we'd planted roses along the front walkway. Where we'd talked about maybe starting a family someday. Emma helped me out of the car, supporting most of my weight because my legs felt like they might give out. The front door was locked, but I still had my key. Inside, the house looked exactly the same as it had the Sunday night I'd been rushed to the hospital. My coffee mug was still in the sink from that morning. The throw pillows on the couch were still arranged the way I'd left them. But something felt different. Hollow, like the life had been sucked out of the walls. Emma was already on her phone, calling someone. "I need to speak with someone about a property sale," she said firmly. 1247 Maple Street. Ann Riverside. "Yes, I'll hold." She covered the phone with her hand and looked at me. "Sarah, sit down. You're going to make yourself sick." I sank onto the couch, the same couch where this whole nightmare had started just 5 days ago. 5 days. In 5 days, while I was unconscious and helpless in a hospital bed, my husband had sold our house. Not listed it, not put it on the market for consideration. Sold it. Past tense. Done deal. Emma was talking to someone at the real estate office, her voice getting sharper with each question. "What do you mean it was a cash sale? What do you mean it closed yesterday? Who was the selling agent?" She scribbled something on a piece of paper, then looked at the notes with disbelief. "Tony Williams? Are you sure?" She hung up and turned to me, her face grave. "Sarah, the house was listed and sold this week. Cash sale, closed yesterday.
The selling agent was Tony Williams. Tony Williams, Michael's colleague at the real estate office, Michael's friend, the guy who'd been to our barbecues, who'd played poker at our kitchen table, who'd congratulated us on our anniversary just last month. How is that even possible? I ask, though my voice sounded far away even to my own ears. I'm on the deed. I'm on the mortgage. How can you sell a house without both owners signing? Emma's expression darkened. Let me call David Martinez. He's a family lawyer I know. This doesn't sound legal. While she made the call, I walked slowly through the house, touching everything like I was saying goodbye. The kitchen table where we'd eaten breakfast every morning for 8 years, the bedroom where we'd planned our future, the bathroom mirror where I'd gotten ready for work every day, where Michael used to brush his teeth beside me while we talked about our plans for the evening. In our bedroom, I noticed something else that made my stomach drop. Michael's dresser drawers were empty. His side of the closet was cleared out. His toiletries were gone from the bathroom. This wasn't a panicked decision made during a medical crisis. This was planned. This was calculated. This was a man who'd been preparing to disappear while I lay in a hospital bed, trusting him to take care of everything. Emma found me sitting on our bed, staring at the empty closet. David Martinez wants to see us first thing Monday morning. He says what happened sounds illegal, but he needs to see all the paperwork to be sure. She sat beside me carefully, mindful of my incision. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I can't believe he would do this to you, especially now, while you're recovering. I looked around the bedroom one more time, memorizing details I'd taken for granted for years. The way the afternoon light came through the window and made patterns on the hardwood floor, the little crack in the ceiling that we'd always meant to fix but never got around to, the framed photo of us on our wedding day, still sitting on Michael's nightstand, smiling like we believed we'd be happy forever. Emma, I said quietly, I need to get my important documents, and I need to pack some clothes. I don't think I can stay here tonight. My voice was calm, but inside, I felt like I was falling through empty space. Emma nodded and helped me gather what I needed. My birth certificate, social security card, passport, the folder where I kept all our financial documents, enough clothes for a few days. As we loaded my things into Emma's car, I took one last look at the house. The roses along the walkway were starting to bloom, bright pink against the green stems. I'd planted those roses 3 springs ago, carefully choosing varieties that would bloom at different times so we'd have color all season long. Michael had helped me dig the holes, complaining about how much work gardening was, but smiling when I got excited about each new bud. Now, someone else would get to enjoy those roses. Someone else would eat breakfast at our kitchen table and sleep in our bedroom and make new memories in the space where I thought I'd build my whole life. And Michael, wherever he was, had made that decision for me while I was unconscious and vulnerable. Emma drove me to her apartment on Oak Avenue, a cozy 2-bedroom place with plants in every window and artwork covering the walls. You'll stay here as long as you need to, she said firmly, as she helped me settle onto her couch. We'll figure this out, Sarah, I promise. She made me tea and toast, the only things I felt like I could keep down, and sat beside me while I tried to process what was happening. I keep thinking I must be misunderstanding something. I stared into my tea. We've been together for 10 years, married for 8. We've been through hard times before. I just can't believe he would abandon me like this. While I was in surgery, Emma, while I was having emergency surgery. My voice cracked on the last words, and Emma put her arm around me carefully. Some people, she said slowly, aren't who we think they are. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show someone's true character. She was right, but it didn't make it hurt any less. I'd spent 8 years building a life with someone who could disappear the moment things got difficult. 8 years investing in forever with someone who saw my medical emergency as an opportunity to escape. That night, lying in Emma's guest bed with pain medication making everything feel fuzzy around the edges, I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what had happened to my life. On Sunday, I was Sarah Chen, married, homeowner, graphic designer with a predictable routine and a 5-year plan. On Friday, I was Sarah Chen, abandoned, homeless, recovering from surgery in my best friend's apartment with no idea where my husband was or why he'd destroyed everything we'd built.
Medical crisis as cover for his betrayal. He thought he could sell our house, take our equity, and disappear while I was helpless to stop him. He thought wrong. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was awake. And I was going to find out exactly what my husband had done with our life while I was unconscious, trusting him to protect it. Then I was going to make sure he faced every consequence of that choice. Monday morning came with gray skies and the smell of rain in the air. Emma drove me to the law offices of Martinez & Associates, a modest building downtown with clean lines and professional signage. David Martinez was a man in his mid-40s, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of a childhood spent working with his father's construction crew before law school changed his trajectory. His office walls were covered with family photos and community service awards, the kind of lawyer who still remembered why he'd wanted to help people in the first place. "Mrs. Chen," he said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the comfortable chairs across from his desk. "Emma told me some of what's happened. I have to say, from what she's described, this situation is highly unusual and potentially illegal. Let's start from the beginning and go through everything step by step." I opened the folder of documents I'd grabbed from the house and spread them across his desk. Our marriage certificate, the deed to 1247 Maple Street, mortgage paperwork, bank statements from our joint accounts. David examined each document carefully, making notes on a yellow legal pad. After about 20 minutes, he looked up with a grim expression. "Sarah, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Did you ever sign any power of attorney documents giving Michael authority to make financial decisions on your behalf?" I shook my head. "Did you sign any paperwork before your surgery authorizing him to sell property?" Again, no. "Have you had any discussions about selling the house recently? Any arguments about money or plans to move?" "None," I said firmly. "We talked about maybe renovating the kitchen this summer. We were happy with the house, happy with the neighborhood. Michael loved that house as much as I did. Or at least I thought he did." David continued making notes, his pen scratching across the paper with increasing urgency. "Sarah, based on what you're telling me and what I'm seeing in these documents, your husband appears to have committed several serious crimes: fraud, forgery, possibly identity theft, depending on how he managed to execute the sale without your signature." The words hit me like physical blows. Crimes. My husband of 8 years hadn't just abandoned me during a medical crisis. He'd committed crimes against me. "How is it even possible?" I asked. "How do you sell a house that belongs to 2 people when one of them is unconscious in a hospital?" David leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "There are a few ways it could have happened, none of them legal. He could have forged your signature on the sales documents. He could have used fake identification. He could have had an accomplice pose as you. All of these scenarios involve serious felonies." Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. "What do we do now?" she asked David. He pulled out a fresh legal pad and began writing. "First, we file a police report immediately. This isn't just a civil matter anymore. It's criminal, fraud. Second, we contact the title company and the buyer's agent to halt any transfer of funds if possible. Third, we freeze all joint accounts and assets to prevent further theft.
And fourth, we file an emergency motion to void the sale based on lack of proper authorization. As David explained the legal process, I felt something shifting inside me. The shock and disbelief that had consumed me since Friday were slowly being replaced by something harder and more focused. Michael had looked into my eyes as they wheeled me into surgery and promised to take care of everything. Then he'd used my unconsciousness as an opportunity to steal my home and disappear. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was calculated betrayal at the most vulnerable moment of my life. "How long will this take?" I asked. David considered the question carefully. "If we can prove fraud, which seems likely given the circumstances, we might be able to get an emergency injunction within a few days to freeze the sale's proceeds. The criminal investigation will take longer, probably months. Recovering your property and assets could take anywhere from weeks to years, depending on how well Michael covered his tracks and how cooperative everyone involved is willing to be." We spent the rest of the morning at the Riverside Police Department filing a report with Detective Lisa Wong, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who specialized in financial crimes. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification or making notes. "Mrs. Chen, I have to tell you, this is one of the more brazen cases of spousal fraud I've seen. The timing alone makes it particularly egregious. Using someone's medical emergency as cover for theft shows a level of premeditation that's frankly shocking." Detective Wong explained that they'd need to interview the real estate agents involved, examine all the paperwork from the sale, and try to trace where the money had gone. "We'll also need to issue a BLO for your husband's vehicle and put alerts on his credit cards and bank accounts. Do you have any idea where he might have gone? Family in other states? Friends who might be helping him hide?" I thought about Michael's family, trying to picture any of them helping him steal from me. His mother, Patricia, lived in Phoenix, but she'd always been kind to me, sending birthday cards and calling every few weeks to check in. Her younger brother, Ryan, was a construction worker here in Riverside, straightforward and honest, the kind of man who'd never been good at lying about anything. "I can't imagine any of his family being involved," I told Detective Wong. "But I also couldn't imagine Michael doing any of this, so maybe I don't know them as well as I thought I did." After giving my statement and signing paperwork, Emma drove me to the bank where Michael and I had our joint accounts. The manager, a woman named Carol, who'd helped us refinance our mortgage 2 years earlier, looked genuinely distressed when I explained the situation. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Let me pull up your accounts right now." She typed quickly on her computer, then frowned at the screen. "Sarah, I'm seeing some concerning activity here. There were several large withdrawals last week, including a cashier's check for $42,000 issued on Thursday." $42,000. The day before I was discharged from the hospital, while I was lying in bed worried about where he was, Michael had been at our bank withdrawing enough money to disappear forever. "Can you trace where that money went?" I asked, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Carol shook her head sadly. "Cashier's checks are essentially untraceable once they're cashed. He could have deposited it anywhere, used it to buy a car, paid cash for an apartment. I'm sorry."
Not enough to rebuild a life, but enough to prevent Michael from taking anything else that belonged to me. Carol also provided printed statements showing all of Michael's recent activity, including ATM withdrawals in cities I'd never heard of, stretching east toward Nevada. "It looks like he's been planning this for at least a week," Carol said gently. "These aren't panic moves, Sarah. This is someone who thought through every step." That evening, back at Emma's apartment, I sat at her kitchen table surrounded by papers, bank statements, police reports, and legal documents. My incision still ached with every breath, and the pain medication made everything feel slightly disconnected from reality. But my mind was clearer than it had been in days. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was someone with evidence, with legal representation, with a plan to fight back. Emma made dinner while I organized everything into folders, creating a timeline of Michael's actions and my recovery. "You know what I keep thinking about?" I said as she set a bowl of soup in front of me. "Last month, Michael seemed stressed about money. He kept checking our bank balance and muttering about expenses. I asked him what was wrong, and he said he was just being cautious, wanting to make sure we had enough saved up in case something unexpected happened." Emma paused in her own eating. "Something unexpected, like your surgery?" I nodded. "I thought he was being responsible, planning ahead. Now I wonder if he was already planning to leave and wanted to make sure there was enough money to steal when the opportunity came." The soup tasted like nothing, but I forced myself to eat anyway. I needed my strength for what was coming. Around 9 that evening, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it anyway. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then a familiar voice, though it sounded strained and different. "Sarah? It's Michael." My hand started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Emma looked up from her laptop, eyes wide, and mouthed, "Speakerphone," while reaching for her own device to record the conversation. "Where are you, Michael?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Another pause. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry about everything. I never wanted it to happen this way." His voice sounded tired, maybe even sad, but there was something else underneath it. Relief, maybe? Or freedom. "You never wanted what to happen this way, Michael? You never wanted to steal our house while I was having emergency surgery? You never wanted to empty our bank account and disappear without a word?" "It's not what you think," he said, and I could hear traffic in the background. Wherever he was calling from, he wasn't hiding in some quiet room. "I was scared, Sarah. When the doctor said you might die, when they said the surgery was dangerous, I panicked. I couldn't handle the thought of losing you, so I made some stupid decisions." I felt my anger crystallizing into something cold and sharp. "You made stupid decisions? Michael, you sold our house. You stole $42,000. You disappeared while I was unconscious and helpless. Those aren't panic decisions. Those are crimes." "I know how it looks," he said, and now his voice was getting defensive. "But I was gonna explain everything when you got better. I was gonna come back and make it right." Emma was frantically taking notes, writing down everything she could hear from his end of the conversation. "Make it right how, exactly? The house is sold, Michael. Someone else owns our home now. The money is gone. You've been missing for 6 days while I was recovering from surgery. How exactly were you planning to make that right?" There was another long pause. When Michael spoke again, his voice was different, colder. "Look, Sarah, I called to tell you that I'm okay and to say I'm sorry. I didn't call to be interrogated like some kind of criminal." The words hit me like a slap. "You are a criminal, Michael. What you did was fraud and theft. The police are already investigating. Detective Wong says it's one of the worst cases of spousal financial abuse she's ever seen." "You called the police?" Now he sounded genuinely shocked, like he couldn't believe I'd involve law enforcement in his crime spree. "What did you expect me to do? Thank you for stealing my home and abandoning me during a medical emergency? Send you a card saying congratulations on your successful fraud?" My voice was rising, and Emma put a calming hand on my shoulder. "This is exactly why I had to leave," he said, and his tone was getting nastier. "You always make everything about you, Sarah. You always have to be the victim in every situation. Did it ever occur to you that I might have been suffering too? That watching you in that hospital might have been traumatic for me?" I stared at the phone in my hands in disbelief. He was actually trying to make himself the victim in this situation. "Michael," I said slowly, "you weren't suffering. You were planning. You were at the bank withdrawing money while I was worried about where you were. You were signing papers to sell our house while I was asking nurses to call you. You weren't traumatized. You were calculating." Emma was writing furiously, capturing every word of his increasingly incriminating statements. "I don't have to listen to this," he snapped. "I called to apologize, not to be attacked. Maybe when you calm down and stop being so dramatic, we can have a rational conversation about dividing assets and moving forward separately with our lives." Dividing assets, moving forward separately. Like our 8-year marriage was just a business partnership he could dissolve with a phone call? "We're not even, Michael. We're done." I hung up before he could respond and sat staring at the phone in my hands. Emma looked at me with a mixture of pride and concern. "How do you feel?" she asked gently. I considered the question carefully. How did I feel after hearing from the man I'd loved for 10 years? The man who'd promised to cherish me in sickness and health? The man who'd stolen my home while I was unconscious? "I felt awake," I said finally. "For the first time in days, maybe even years. I feel completely awake."
Emma smiled and saved the recording on her phone. "Well, he just confessed to multiple crimes on a recorded phone call, so I'd say being awake is working in your favor." She was right. Michael's call hadn't been an apology or an explanation. It had been a gift of evidence, delivered directly to us by his own arrogance and stupidity. The next morning, I took the recording to Detective Wong, who listened with growing amazement. "Mrs. Chen, your husband just made our case significantly easier. Admitting to theft, confessing to financial fraud, and threatening you over the phone are all separate crimes. We'll use this recording to get warrants for his financial records and expand the criminal charges." David Martinez was equally pleased when I played the recording for him. "Sarah, he's essentially confessed to everything we suspected. This recording alone is probably enough to void the house sale and recover most of your money." But even as the legal machinery began moving in my favor, I knew this was about more than money or property. Michael had revealed something fundamental about who he was, something I'd been blind to for 8 years. He wasn't a man who'd panicked during a crisis. He was a man who'd seen my medical emergency as an opportunity to escape a marriage he didn't want while making sure he got paid for the inconvenience. That afternoon, Emma and I drove past 1247 Maple Street one more time. The sold sign was gone, replaced by moving trucks and new owners carrying boxes into what had been my home. I watched a woman about my age directing the movers, pointing toward the kitchen where I'd made coffee every morning for 6 years. She looked happy, excited about her new life in my old house. I didn't feel angry at her. She was innocent in all this, just a buyer who'd found a house she loved and bought it legally, not knowing it was stolen from a woman in a hospital bed. But watching her claim my space, my memories, my carefully planted roses, I felt the last of my illusions about Michael dissolve completely. This wasn't about him being scared or making mistakes under pressure. This was about him being exactly the kind of person who could look at his unconscious wife and see a business opportunity instead of someone he'd promised to protect. The man I'd married, the man I'd planned to grow old with, had never actually existed. I'd been loving a performance for 8 years, while the real Michael waited for his chance to cash out and disappear. Emma drove me back to her apartment, where I spent the rest of the day working on my laptop, updating my freelance portfolio and reaching out to old clients. If I was going to rebuild my life from nothing, I needed to start earning money immediately. The legal battle would take months, maybe years, but the bills would start coming next week. Michael had destroyed my stability, but he hadn't destroyed my ability to work, to create, to survive. That evening, as I sat organizing my laptop files and planning my return to full-time freelancing, my phone rang again. This time it was Ryan, Michael's younger brother. "Sarah, I just heard what happened. I can't believe it. I'm so sorry." His voice was thick with emotion, and I could tell he was genuinely shocked by his brother's actions. "Ryan, did you know about any of this? Did Michael say anything to you about wanting to leave or having problems with money?" "Nothing," Ryan said firmly. "The last time I talked to him was about 3 weeks ago, and he seemed normal. He was complaining about work, asking if I wanted to come over and help him fix something in the garage. He seemed like the same Michael he's always been." There was a pause.
Sarah, I need you to know that what he did doesn't represent our family. Mom is devastated when she found out. She wants to call you, but she wasn't sure if you'd want to hear from any of us. I appreciated Ryan's honesty and his family's concern, but Michael's betrayal had complicated all those relationships in ways that would take time to sort out. I know this isn't your fault, Ryan. None of Michael's family is responsible for what he chose to do. But right now, I need to focus on putting my life back together. Maybe someday we can figure out how to stay connected despite everything that's happened. After hanging up with Ryan, I realized that Michael's crime had stolen more than just my house and money. It had stolen my extended family, my sense of home, my ability to trust my own judgment about people. For 8 years, I'd shared holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesday nights with someone who was apparently capable of abandoning me at my most vulnerable moment. If I could be that wrong about the person closest to me, how could I trust my judgment about anyone? But as I sat in Emma's guest room that night, surrounded by legal documents and recovery plans, I realized something else. Michael's betrayal had also revealed something important about me. When faced with the complete destruction of my life, I hadn't collapsed. I'd gotten angry, gotten organized, and gotten moving. I'd assembled a legal team, gathered evidence, and started fighting back before I'd even fully processed what had happened to me. Michael thought he was stealing from a helpless victim who wouldn't fight back. Instead, he'd awakened someone who was stronger than he'd ever bothered to notice. Someone who wasn't going to disappear quietly or accept his version of events or rewrite our history to make himself the victim. He'd made the mistake of underestimating the woman he'd lived with for 8 years. And that mistake was about to cost him everything he thought he'd gotten away with. Tomorrow, Detective Wong would begin tracing his financial activity and issuing warrants for his arrest. David Martinez would file motions to freeze his assets and void the fraudulent house sale. Emma would continue being the friend who'd saved me when my husband abandoned me. And I would continue being someone I'd never had to be before, a woman fighting for her life against someone who'd promised to protect it. The man I'd married, the man I'd planned to grow old with, had never actually existed. I'd been loving a performance for 8 years, while the real Michael waited for his chance to cash out and disappear.